So welcome back to our Personhood podcast. It's been a little while since we've been with you, and it's been a very interesting time indeed. I'm here today with Sarah Quale, our Director of Education, and also one of our board members. Our board member from Personhood, Iowa is Pastor Mike Demastus. He's a pastor in Des Moines, and today we're going to be talking about the church in the time of the coronavirus. And of course, Personhood is a Christ-centered organization, and all of our affiliates are in one way or another biblical organizations. We have our statement of faith, and so from the very inception of Personhood, the idea of the Imago Dei, being made in the image and likeness of God, is crucial to our identity as an organization. And so I think this pandemic has really hit us hard in our ability to practice our faith and to live our faith in our community. So without further ado, Pastor Mike, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, and I'm happy to be a part of this discussion.
So I guess as a pastor and as a board member of Personhood, I guess can you tell us a little bit about how your church has survived in the time of pandemic? I know you have a pretty unique situation because you're in Iowa, and every state is different. I know the left coast and the East Coast have it a little harder, but right. How has it been for you guys?
So our governor, Governor Kim Reynolds, is she's a believer and she's very pro-life. To say that, she has done a very good job of not putting us on solid lockdown like other states. We have had a lot of our liberties all the way throughout this experience. Although I will say that, she did also shut down a whole lot, and she gave guidelines to the church, but she never threatened the church, not one time, in terms of these are just the guidelines, of worship. And so when all the states started to lock down, her guidelines went down to 10 people for a gathering. And we complied with that. In fact, I don't know of any church, I'm just being honest, don't know of any church in the state of Iowa that actually did not comply with the guidelines. So we initially went to online, plus recording my messages so that if people weren't on Facebook, because we do a Facebook Live version of the sermon, so we live stream it during the actual experience. But we also recorded it for those that aren't on Facebook, put it up on our website as well. So that's what we did for several weeks. And then on Easter Sunday, we were able to do our very first drive-in service where the whole church came, and more than our church. Actually, we had a lot of just people in the community that knew we were doing this that came as well. And it was like a very moving experience for me. I'll never forget Easter Sunday of this year, but we had, the drive-ins. It was pouring down rain. Luckily, we have a carport, so I was underneath the carport. But it was a wonderful experience because we got a little FM transmitter and broadcast our service out through a particular FM station. And people pulled up, and we were told what station to pull into. And then at the conclusion of the service, we had them drive through our carport there, and they just they were able to participate in communion, and we kind of served that in a unique way. We can talk about some of those particulars and however you want to do that, but and then we've been doing that ever since then until this past Sunday was our very first Sunday back inside the building.
Okay. So how has it been for you, Sarah, in Minnesota? I know you have a very different situation, even though you're not that geographically that far from Iowa. Right. But I know in terms of politics, it's very far.
Yes. Governor Walz has locked churches down. In fact, I believe we are one of only 10 states that still has complete lockdown on churches. Though this couple days ago, Monday, he has started to lift some of the restrictions. We're allowed to gather in groups of 10 or less. And that does apply to churches. So you can have 10 people or less in your sanctuary. But most churches aren't doing anything different. They're still online. They're still, streaming, doing whatever. But yeah, it's seriously tyrannical here. The state is pushing back. There's a huge grassroots movement of even businesses opening up, defying orders. There's lawsuits now against the governor. I think Jason Lewis, who's running for Senate, just filed a lawsuit today to challenge his emergency powers. He just extended his emergency powers through June 12th.
Yeah.
And that is after the legislature has adjourned. So basically, he has millions and millions of dollars to spend of federal aid, no legislature at all doing any kind of oversight. And I know several of the Republicans here have put forth bills to try to strip him of his emergency powers, and the Democrats in the House have not allowed those bills to pass. So it is a real fight here. But churches are at the end of the spectrum. He's got a lot of good graphic arts people working for him, right? And so he's coming out with these little dials and all these cute little graphics. And churches are at the end. Churches are at the end with restaurants and bars being fully opened. So, you know, it's not good here. It's not a good situation.
Yeah, it's, you know, I think that the most shocking thing to me has been the discriminatory approach to the practice of faith.
Right.
And maybe this hasn't been the case in Iowa because the governor is a faithful person.
Mm-hmm.
But in many states, what you're seeing is, you know, as the states begin to open up, the church is pushed to the back of the line. And, you know, for something as fundamental to our country, even in our history, the founding of our country, right, as religious liberty, and clearly in our Constitution, and just to the population at large, it's really shocking. And, you know, I've been thinking a lot about this in the last couple of days, and how a society reacts to, you know, to a pandemic or a catastrophe, whether it's, you know, man-made or natural. And I think there are sort of two options. And traditionally, you know, you have free countries that will they'll react by trusting their citizens, by the ability to have free speech, by the ability to, you know, to trust kind of the local judgment of the citizenry. Because if you're a free country, then you trust that the citizens are going to act in their own you know, best interest. And then there's the opposite side, which is kind of like the Chinese and the Soviet model. And that's, you know, central control. It's tyrannical. It's locked down. There's no free speech. And unfortunately, I really see that a lot of our elites have just gone lock, stock, and barrel for the tyrannical approach, where, you know, the Silicon Valley elites are censoring any speech that they don't like. And I'm sure there's a lot of craziness out there. There always is, right? That's the whole point with free speech. You allow people to choose whether they want to wear the tinfoil hat or whether or not they don't, but you trust your people. And so we've seen these sort of overseers just take charge in Google, YouTube, Facebook. And of course, most of those people are not people of faith. And so religious concerns are, you know, in the back of their mind. So it's a very interesting times. But on the positive side, I've seen, you know, people reacting to this tyranny in a way that I wish pro-lifers reacted, you know, to the judicial tyranny.
Yes.
You know, as you mentioned, Sarah, you know, you have kind of these executive powers that are acting completely out of control without the legislature. The courts actually have been sort of decent for the most part in checking some of the tyranny. I don't know if
sure have.
You know, if you saw the court case in Oregon, of all places.
Yeah, Wisconsin too.
In Wisconsin too. So, you know, where these governors they're just like, well, okay, well, state of emergency till a cure is found. Well, we don't have a cure for cancer, and that kills more people than the coronavirus. It doesn't justify a tyranny, right? Why don't they let the legislature come in? Because the legislature is a lot closer to the people, and so, you know, it would be a lot harder to herd everyone. So it's very, very interesting. But I keep going back to our topic with the church. You know, if you think about the first, you know, the Passover, the fact that, you know, you had after Christ's death and resurrection, the church was in hiding, right? The church was basically under lockdown. And so I think that's been something kind of neat for me to experience, in the sense that, I'm in Northern Virginia. We have, Governor KKK Ralph Northam, Mr. Infanticide himself, and so
Just a gnaw of them.
Yes.
It's been pretty severe, so I think the experience of having Herod or one of those Romans above me is kind of similar to what we're living today.
Well, one thing that I would say is that, because people have brought out, that, and we can get into this part of the discussion, the virtue signaling that has happened throughout this experience has been incredibly infuriating to me.
Yeah.
To equate that if I choose to not wear a mask, I'm somehow not loving others, and that I'm obviously going against what Christ would do. He laid down his own rights, and when he came, and so a lot of that kind of virtue signaling is happening. And some of the places it's coming from are very anti-Christian sources who normally mock Christ and mock Christianity, and now they're trying to preach to us about who Christ is, like we don't know who he is.
Right.
And I find that just incredibly just infuriating.
Yeah.
But here I think that in Iowa we like I said, we've been able to maintain a lot of our liberties. And that's been very, very helpful. But the individuals and the way that individuals have responded to this, one of the concerns that I have pastorally is the divisiveness of this experience within the church. That's not only has it been an issue during this struggle, I think it will be an ongoing issue as we try to figure out how to come back out of this struggle. Because there are many who feel, from the spectrum of this is all a bunch of hooey blooey, to those that think that getting the coronavirus equals I'm going to die. And so that's, we've got to figure out how do we balance that, and how do we keep peace in the church, and try to keep people from, okay, we have these different thoughts on this, but we still are brothers and sisters in Christ. And so how do we move forward?
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I think the church has such an important role to play in the psychological welfare of people. Because of the lockdown, so many people are feeling alone, and because of our secular society, which has done a good job in terms of medically dealing with illnesses, but it doesn't do a good job at dealing with the meaning of life. And I think that's where the church is crucial. And that's where the church helps you confront tough situations like this, where, it's serious. A lot of people have lost family members. Nobody wants to belittle it. But I think when you have a conception of life after death, and that changes your entire perspective, so that, you're no longer virtue signaling, but you're really understanding the power of your faith.
Right. And as a side note, yesterday I have some non-Christian neighbors, and one of them came to me. We've had very minimal spiritual conversations, and it's very interesting when they occur. But he came to me in tears because one of his very good friends had committed suicide a couple of days ago. And this poor individual was a paraplegic who made a paraplegic about 18 months ago. So he's been dealing with that. And then the lockdown occurred, and he ended up taking his own life. And he, everybody, including this young man's family, knows it's because he was so isolated, and there was just felt, hopeless and helpless. And that's a story I think that is kind of a story we don't hear a lot about. The fact that this lockdown has had so many other effects upon people's lives that are so negative and so bad, and the church is the only one, honestly, that can step into that place and try to help.
Yes, I agree with that 200%. The impact, the mental health impact this has already had and will continue to have for years, I think, to come. And the church doors are still shut. And so how do we reach people, right? How do we go out there? Yes, we can be online, but as both of you know, in our society, there are less and less people who are walking into a church building who are lost. We have to go out to them. We have to be where they are. It's the proximity piece that's so important. bringing Jesus to people. Jesus went out among people. He felt compassion. He acted. He didn't just stand back and watch from a distance, right? And so to be shuttered right now with this massive mental health crisis that we're just starting to see the beginning of, I think, to me is a very scary place for this country to be.
Oh, I
and
100% agree.
Yeah, and the problem is that the government does such a poor job of the system, the secular healthcare system does such a poor job of managing mental health, from a systemic perspective. And the church knows how to do this. We should do this. We do this, and yet we're being kind of bound right now, right, in a physical sense, because we can't welcome people in. We can't be in physical proximity to them, and that's a huge problem.
And a greater issue too on that same note is that the government is dictating who is essential and who is non-essential.
Yes.
And
right.
And the church has been deemed non-essential, and right. that's not only a blight upon our society as a whole to say that that's acceptable. It has really harmful effects upon our culture as well.
Mm-hmm. Just I notice all the words being used, right? There's a lot of propaganda with COVID, and non-essential is, I think, one of the most stinging to me, because there are non-essential people. There are there's non-essential businesses, work, church. Even to plant that seed in someone's mind, to say that the church is no longer essential when our entire society is turned upside down.
By the way,
such a lie.
Some of those people that say that very thing are the same people that say there are no illegal people. Right. And these are the people that try to focus on humanity, but now they're telling the church you aren't essential, and that's a very weird.
It's
democratic stance.
It's insane. I mean, some of the things that really are happening do seem like conspiracy theories if they weren't true. The fact that you have people with businesses who are following, the best practices in terms of health, they're going to jail. And then the people in jail that are, I think they've been releasing even murderers and rapists.
Yes. Child molesters.
Yes.
Child molesters.
I've seen three stories of individuals that were released from prison that ended up within days actually murdering an individual after they had been released. 3 different stories I've seen nationwide.
Right. It's crazy. So very interesting times. I think that the censorship issue to me has been really incredible, and I think it's something that we're going to see just escalate this year because of the political filter around everything. And it's so harmful because it's not just a question of suppressing the faith, which they do, but just suppressing the truth in general. How hard has it been to actually get data on what the best ways to deal with this are? Sweden tried to do a different approach, and immediately they were piled upon. And it's very, very worrying that this, like you said, Sarah, there's all of this propaganda, and that a lot of people are accepting it. A lot of people out here are just kind of following the herd mentality. And that's very, very dangerous, because once you accept a certain level of surveillance, with contact tracing and all of this, the government is not going to let that go. I think there was an economist that said that the most permanent thing in the world is a temporary government program.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think, you give the government an inch and they're not giving it back.
Right. Absolutely.
I think I read an article, one of the technology companies that was helping with the contact tracing apps were trying to, in their project plan, as they were looking at developing this and looking at meeting the specifications that the federal government wanted, one of the things they did was say, okay, well, here are the risk mitigation strategies we're going to put in place to make sure that when this is over, that data, we can no longer access that data. It gets cut off, it gets put somewhere. What do we do with it? And the government said, oh, no, we don't want that. we don't want you to cut it off. We want it to be an open door. We want to have this available to us when this is over.
Yeah.
And I think that is such a huge story, that nobody's talking about.
Right. And but it's being suppressed, when people try to put it out. I'm working a lot with LifeSite News now, and anytime there's a story on the origin of the coronavirus, that doesn't just replicate what the Chinese Communist Party has said, with the wet market and all that, it immediately gets censored by Facebook. And that actually doesn't make any sense, because Facebook itself is not allowed in China. And so it's not, maybe they have, because Facebook is an openly traded company. Maybe there's a lot of Chinese capital, managing Facebook. I don't know. But you would think if anybody was going to be weary of censorship, Chinese Communist Party censorship, it'd be Facebook. But no, they're suppressing everything that, that they think is not mainstream. And, the mainstream science is kind of like global warming. It's just this herd mentality.
Yeah.
So it's, I don't know. I don't know what our near future is gonna give us here, but it's certainly interesting. It certainly raises the issue of, resistance to tyranny, which, bringing it back to personhood is something that we have to really understand and be able to channel without going overboard into anarchy.
Right.
But may I say this, as you get into that topic, I have never seen more misapplication of Romans 13 within the church over the last 2 months as I have seen on social media, telling people why it's important to accept just carte blanche what the government is asking us to do. And when you begin to question, you are obviously, you don't love others, and you're not showing your true Christian spirit of doing that. And I just don't understand how people can view Romans 13 in a way where they think America shouldn't even exist because of their resistance to tyranny.
Right.
It's an important point. It really is. And I've seen it too, Pastor. It's everywhere in the church. And, I'm no Bible scholar, but I know just from being involved in personhood that there is such a misapplication, even when it comes to pro-life issues too, obviously, because, we're just, it's the law. We're just not to stand up against that. We're to, it's God instituted man as leaders and we are to follow man. And wait a minute, it goes against everything that this country was founded on. And I think I've been in conversations on Facebook about that too. And I just said, so the American Revolution wasn't spiritually motivated?
Right. And the idea, and I not just that, you have the Civil War and the struggle of true, civil rights for, every person. And just looking at the fact that our government was so opposed at one point to giving personhood status to Black people. And that was a very, pardon the pun, but a very dark time in our history that we would do that we would look at certain individuals and say, you're property, even at the highest realms of our judicial system, we know that those kinds of decisions must be fought, and they must be vehemently fought. And we need to rise up against those kinds of things. Personhood is always worth fighting for.
What's interesting is I saw one of the most heretical Catholic personalities, who was kind of jabbing his finger in the eye of pro-lifers, saying that, if you really cared about saving human lives, that, you would obey what the government's telling you.
Oh yeah. I've seen that everywhere.
I'm sure. Yeah. And I'm sure it's not just Catholic personalities, but, and for those who don't know it, I'm Catholic. And so, it's just, you see it everywhere.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, with pro-lifers, we're used to fighting judicial tyranny, but in this case, it's executive tyranny.
Yes.
I think the whole point of our Constitution, and the reason I really think that God, blessed this country to be as successful and to nurture liberty as much as it's been able to, is because we followed, we had an understanding of human nature.
Right.
And the corrupting influences of power and the need for having different branches that balance each other out. And so I think in one sense, this whole epidemic has been a wake-up call to a lot of people to say, whether it's the courts or it's an out-of-control governor or a local health official or the police, even, when they get out of line, people have to stand up. And sometimes it is legitimate to stand up and to say no more.
Right.
Yeah.
You look at, like, even before the coronavirus hit and like the decision or the move amongst the Congress of the state of New York, their own congressional body, passing legislation that basically allows people to abort a child up until the very moment of birth, and then celebrating that, and then having the governor sign that, and then having that strengthened and being upheld in the court system. You have all three branches of government in a decision like that, basically, that are being tyrannical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you get into the question. This is another very interesting question, I think, for the times is, what is the will of God with the coronavirus? Is this a punishment for how far we've drifted? And I think this question varies depending on your theology. And I don't think we can know exactly the will of God in one situation and what role nature plays in it. But certainly, I think as believers, we should all think, I think maybe it's a time to heighten our prayer and fasting and religious observance, and not to deem churches non-essential, which is right. What we're doing. It's like we're doing the exact opposite, people. If God sent this our way, we're not hearing him.
Right. Absolutely. And the big answer to that is maybe God's behind it. We don't know for sure. But I think I remember saying this, that if God is going to judge any nation, America deserves it more than, most, because of where we've been.
Yeah. And I think too, you even with all of this going on, the problem that we're seeing is, yes, you have some people rising up, right? And this doesn't make sense to me. I have questions. When I ask questions, I'm shut down. Why is that? So there's people really thinking, I think, a lot right now. And so you have that side of things, but then you also have the side of things where people are still just very afraid. Mm-hmm. Because of the propaganda, because right. The virus is real.
Right.
It's not a hoax, right? Where nobody's saying that. But it has been devastating to the population that it's targeting. And those people have families and people know people who've had it or they're on the front lines. And so it is really affecting people. But you add to that all of these words, this entire lexicon. We don't watch TV at my house. We don't watch regular TV. And I think we turned it on the other day for something and there were commercials on, and my kids don't see commercials. And I'm telling you, every single commercial, stay safe, stay at home, we're in this together. It was literally every single product that was advertised had something to say about the coronavirus. And it just struck me in the middle of my living room that this is being fed into people's minds all day long, every day. And Pastor Mike, you just opened your church this past Sunday. And did people come? Were people, how did that go for you? I've been the pastor of my church for 22 years. And so I feel like I should know my church, but I really misread where my people are at. I thought coming into this time where we're actually going to open up our doors and have people come in for worship, that it was about 80-20. 80% of the people were ready to come back in. 20% of the people were still very cautious. That's how I kind of gauged it. But actually, it was the reverse. And we had a small percentage of people that showed up and came inside. And some of the things that we're still doing, by the way, we are recording in advance our like the message and putting that on our
our website, and then we live stream our service, and we also FM broadcast the service to an area around, where our church is, so you can come into the parking lot, tune into an FM station, and listen to what's happening. And so we had people that still showed up in the parking lot, didn't come out of their car, but just stayed there to enjoy the worship service. And we had 21 people inside the building. We had half a dozen cars outside, and then everybody else was online watching the live stream. And it was a little deflating to me because I thought it was just the reverse. I thought, man, from what I've heard from people, it's just, but that's not the case. And I think that as one of my radio personality friends has said, the panic porn has really set into people's hearts, and they just can't let go of the fear that has been created because of that whole quote panic porn.
Right. Was that Steve Dace?
Yes.
Yeah. I saw that.
Yeah, it's good. It's, the power of propaganda is real. And I think you see that. I mean, how can a nation, the most populous nation in the world, never have an election and not blink?
Right.
China is masterful at it. To some extent, Russia is doing it, and they certainly did it with the Soviet Union. And so it's incredible. I mean, there's those 10 phrases that you see everywhere. Like even kids can recite them. It's like we're all living in North Korea.
Right. I mean, before February, had you ever heard the term social distancing?
No.
I've never heard it. And how common in the vernacular is that phrase now? It's been 3 months, and it's like we've said it forever.
That was just my lifestyle in college when I spent my days in the library.
Yeah, right. Well, I don't like where we're at, but the thing that Sunday revealed to me, and I don't want you to get the wrong idea. We had a great time, great worship experience, and just it's kind of that after the service kind of debriefing in my heart what was going on, that I kind of felt deflated. But I realized something. It's going to take a lot longer to get back to normal than I thought. My people, and I had just spent, no kidding, 9 weeks preaching through the book of Joshua on having courage. And I was doing that all through the midst of this experience of the coronavirus, and getting a lot of amens and getting a lot of, understanding, yep, we got to march out, we got to move forward in boldness and have courage. God didn't give us a spirit of fear, gave us a spirit of power and a sound mind. And so those are the kinds of things that I thought that's where we were at. And the moment that we get to being able to open our doors, we have a spirit of fear, and that's where we're at. And let me clarify. I think it's okay for people that feel that they're at a vulnerable place to be very cautious. I don't have a problem with that. I even recommended to my church, if you're over the age of 70, you should probably stay home and watch this online. But I don't know, it's kind of a dark reality that we're in this for a long time. That's kind of where we're at.
It's going to take people a little while to get back to normal. And I think, people tend to follow other people. And so maybe, the first week you'll see, 20%, and then the next week, maybe you'll see 30%, and people will kind of buck up the courage to do it.
I'm hoping that's the case, because that has been the experience of a good friend of mine who also pastors here in the Des Moines area. Their church opened 3 weeks ago. So this past Sunday was his third Sunday being open. First Sunday, he had a smaller group. He said he had about 45 people. The next Sunday, it was a little bit bigger. And then last Sunday, it was even bigger yet. And he said what's been really interesting is that people that have been coming are staying for hours afterwards. He said they're even bringing meals, sitting in the church building and, fellowshipping together. And he said last week was really great because they brought not just meals, but board games, and they were playing for hours in the building, just staying together to be able to fellowship, because they miss that, and so that's pretty cool. And so I'm hoping to see something similar, with us as we continue, because our doors are never going closed again. I'm not doing it. We're not going to go backwards, period.
Yeah. I'm on Friday, I got a call from a local activist who's going to go and protest at the Archdiocese in DC. We have an archbishop who's still kept all the churches closed, and so there's going to be a little protest there. I'm going to go and join them.
Good.
Good for you.
Yeah, it needs to happen. I really firmly believe in my heart of hearts, we've got to start walking forward and trying to open the church back up. We've got to. And, I know there's a lot of differing points of opinion on this, but we cannot accept life online as normal. It's not. Right. And doing church this way, thank God for the technology, but it's not church. It's not how God designed it to be. And we can't do all of the one another's online. We just can't. You can't participate in communion as a community online. We've got to be able to get back to meeting face to face again.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It reminds me of, I don't know if you've seen the Chosen series. It's a kind of the online phenomena, right?
I've seen like one episode, honestly. So it was the one before they released the whole series.
Okay. I thought the first couple episodes were a little slow, but it gets really good. There's an episode there where Jesus, with the lepers. And it's like, okay, well, Jesus, is God, all powerful. He could have just, spoken in the guy's, the leper's ear from a mile away and kept social distancing.
Right.
But, he went right up to him.
And he touched him.
Touched him. Yes.
Touched him.
Yes.
And I think there's something important there for us.
Yeah.
I agree.
In the courage that shows, and I think it really, Jesus did it to show us the way. And I think that's why I'm hopeful when you're saying, there's only 20%. I thought it was going to be more. I'm confident that people are going to see the courage of that 20%. And it is a scary thing, and we've all been scared, scared to death with all the propaganda. But I think they're going to see that the world's not ending, and they're going to come back.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful of that.
And just to echo what you're saying, one of my favorite books is a book by Lynn Anderson about being a pastor, shepherding your people. And the book's title is "They Smell Like Sheep." And I think that is what it's all about. You can't proxy shepherd people. You have to do it, in face-to-face contact. And getting around sheep means you're going to smell like them. And it's a great book, by the way, just as an aside on leadership in general.
I'll look it up. Well, very good. I don't know if Sarah, if you have anything else. I know there was one thing I think I wanted to talk to you about, and that's kind of a follow-up on some of the research that you've been doing in terms of the effect of the coronavirus on chemical abortions.
Yeah, there's a lawsuit in Minnesota right now against Governor Walz because he has allowed the abortion facilities to operate. And the lawsuit is the Thomas More Society put it forward on behalf of some organizations here and some individuals. And they're trying to get him to shut down surgical abortions because chemical abortions are available. And so that made me scratch my head quite a bit, because I think one of the things that we're doing, and we continue to do and have done for many years, is allow abortion to be in the construct of legitimate medicine. And as all of us here know, it is not in any way, shape, or form. But in the pro-life movement, we kind of chip away and argue on the edges of that. And so this lawsuit, I believe, is just another example. But as the coronavirus has moved forward, what I've seen is, for example, there were 20 attorneys general across the country that petitioned, I believe, the FDA head and, someone else I can't think of right now, but they're trying to get the restrictions on the abortion pill, on dispensation of the abortion pill. They want it through the mail. Right? They want it online to be sold, and they're pushing and pushing. Now, they've been doing this for years and years in the abortion industry, but now they have the government who has a crisis in front of them, to use specifically for this purpose, and they are. And they're trying to get the FDA to pressure the FDA to drop that. And so some of the rhetoric surrounding that is if a woman wants an abortion, she shouldn't have to risk her life to leave her home to have her abortion.
How twisted.
Yes.
So how about this? You know, we've got, and I pastorally, I've had people waiting for essential surgeries, dealing with pain, and I have to have that hip replaced or that knee replaced or whatever, and they've had to wait for that. But yet a woman can go and murder her child, or the whole idea of some person wasn't able to go in to have that biopsy or that that cancer screening, and they find out after they're allowed to do that. Now, if we had caught it earlier, it wouldn't be terminal, but I'm sorry, this is the only option we have for you now. And that's how many stories like that are going to be told, but yet we have continued to murder without pausing these babies in every state.
And actually it's increasing in many states, because for the states that have been trying to shut down surgical abortions, again, surgical abortions, not chemical abortions, but surgical ones, you've had injunctions put on, you've had some time go by where the abortions have halted. Women have just gone to other states. And the article that I wrote recently on personhood.org talks about that. Like we're kind of in post-Roe. This is what it's going to look like. So as we fight to overturn Roe at the federal level, we need to consider what that actually means, because there are different states. What was it, Mississippi or Texas, that was saw a 250% increase in surgical abortions.
Right.
Like massive increases, because women are traveling across state lines because they can't get an abortion where they're at temporarily.
Right. And that, just to flesh that out, what you mean is because most people assume that Roe versus Wade will return abortion to the states. Some states will ban it, some states won't. And so right now you have some states that deemed abortion non-essential. Except, of course, they always have caveats. And I wonder, how big those loopholes are. But regardless, in those states, a lot of women have been just traveling to the nearest state where it's available. And
but
also
I think
chemical abortions, getting, because yes, the big, huge providers and the more legitimate providers may wait for the FDA, but I have a feeling they don't give a, they don't give a hoot.
Well, no, they don't. And even, right. And Guttmacher, one of the things that I reported in my analysis of Guttmacher was that, there are some clinics in the South in particular, that region saw 21% of the clinics down there reported that women came in trying to self-abort with the abortion pill, because this information is readily available. It's being pushed to them by the abortion industry. There are books, there are websites, there are illegal pill markets. There's just whole network that's been set up over the last 15 or 20 years that they're flipping the switch on during coronavirus, because this is the opportunity to legitimize that entire network that they've built up. And as we fight over surgical abortions and what it's going to look like when Roe's overturned, we are totally and completely missing what is going to happen. It's going to happen. It already is. It's just going to get worse. And that's
the premise is granted, like you say, every time we argue for a particular point on this.
Absolutely, because we refuse to look at what is already happening, because we're too interested in chipping around the edges of this thing. And it's to our detriment. It's to millions and millions of babies' detriment.
Because we're too afraid to challenge a fundamental, core problem at the heart of Roe, because it's been determined by a tyrannical court to be the law of the land.
Right.
And so, that it's interesting. This whole crisis is really kind of putting a stark contrast on everything.
It is.
And I just feel like our country's a tinderbox. And I pray that, come November, we're able to keep it together, because God knows it's going to get dicey.
I agree with you. And I wouldn't have ever thought that, but I mean, it took us 90 days to get into almost full on socialism in our country. And I believe that this November, something wicked this way comes. if we don't change course. I mean, we've
Yeah.
got to begin to get this country opened up again. We've got to,
Yeah.
for our own soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was great talking to you guys, and
Thank you.
we have to do it again. You know, just for full disclosure, Mike Demastus has a great radio show in Iowa that we have the luck to come and speak at once in a while.
Yeah.
So, you know, for everybody who's watching, maybe we can include the link to the show. How's that been going during the coronavirus? Have you been able to do it?
Oh yeah. I haven't slowed down at all. The only thing that happened for us was I can't remember when, but we've been probably a month at least or more been doing just phone interview only, you know, but now we're back into in studio, which is great because, you know, Iowa's opening back up. I don't know what it's like for the other stations within the network because they're in North Carolina and I don't know where else, Utah, a few other states. But our affiliate here in Iowa, we're bringing people back in the studio again. We're trying to get back to normal.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, God bless you guys. Thank you for taking the time to make this call happen. And we will post this as soon as we can get it edited and go from there.
Okay. Sounds good.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you. God bless you.
God bless you. Have a good night.